What's the hardest thing? Is it finding your way around the house at night?
Yeah, because I suppose if you didn't have to get up to a baby, it wouldn't even cross your mind.
Of course.
I'm finding that a wee challenge.
Is it affecting your baby?
What was that, sorry?
Is that affecting your baby?
I don't think he's even noticed, no.
All right, so nothing in prospect. Would you be hoping for what, tomorrow, the next day?
At this stage, I wouldn't be too certain of that.
Oh, really?
We're hoping to get an update tomorrow, but we've had the people restoring the main line next to us had come from Tauranga, so they weren't too sure. My line's just ourselves and the neighbours, so I'd say we're a relatively low priority.
You sound good-tempered about it. Is that your attitude? You don't mind too much?
I just feel like there's nothing we can do about it. They're working as hard as they can. I mean, people are coming from all over the country to try and get it back on for us.
Yeah.
They can only do what they can do with the resources and manpower that they've got. So.
That's a really generous point of view, actually.
Yeah.
Thinking of them at a time like this for you.
Yeah, I know. My friend's partner's actually a linesman, and he's not sleeping very well at night because he's worried about all the people without power.
Oh, bless him.
Yeah, I know. It must actually be a hard job when things like this happen.
What's the baby? I just heard the baby. What's the baby's name?
Hunter.
Hunter. Yes. I think Hunter's calling, but we might check in with you in a day or two just to see how you're going.
No worries.
All right, Morgan. Thank you. Morgan Turner.
All the best.
In the countryside. Before we go, today a young woman stoops to drink from a river in a new government-funded 100% pure campaign designed for overseas consumption. And as we know, many of our river sites you do not stoop to drink from. E. coli, Giardia in places.
Well, if you have like North, you think twice about the taps, don't you?
Stooping to drink from the tap. Where she is drinking from is uncontaminated. It's at the Blue Pools near Haast, but the ad seems to recognise the issue we've got with our water, because as she raises the water in her cupped hands, the shot changes to herbs in her hand. So you never actually see her drink the water. She sort of wisely sniffs instead. In response to criticism, Tourism New Zealand's repeating the mantra that 100% pure is not an environmental promise. What is 100% pure, in your opinion, if it's not an environmental promise, please?
Well, just an advertising slogan. I mean, I think everybody can get a bit too carried away about this. I mean, it's what a wonderful ad. I think it portrays it all very well. It's very appealing. It's, I mean, if we have to start getting all PC about advertisements. I mean, advertisements for years have
lied.
Lied. That's a good word. They've lied. There's no other word for it.
It's a lie. The ad's a lie.
I've blocked my ears at this point.
They're lying about the purity of our water and the cleanliness of New Zealand, and we all know that our water is being polluted by agriculture. So I think it might be wise to try and get people to come to New Zealand, and they've got to do what they've got to do, which is lie about the cleanliness of our water. But we all know that's not true, and some of our rivers we can't even swim in. So
some, but many we can. I mean, it's not a big porky. I mean, the water quality is an issue, but we're addressing it. It's not.
We need to address it faster.
Well, maybe we do, and I'm singing from the same hymn sheet as you. But as far as the ad goes, I think it's a wonderful thing to advertise by comparison to other parts of the world. I think we are clean. We are pure.
Jonathan will name all the safe rivers now.
Well, the headwaters of the Mohaka, for instance, and the headwaters of the Nararoro, to name just two.
Jonathan Krebs, lovely to have your company.
It's always fun.
And Golnaz Bassam-Tavar, thank you, Golnaz.
Thank you so much.
And Sharon's coming up right now.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly, and on behalf of our excellent team, haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tonight, one of the country's largest social housing projects looks set to be taken over by an Australian housing group after the New Zealand providers failed to make the cut. Tamaki Housing Association manages hundreds of state or social houses in East Auckland, and it's down to a short list of 2. Local community housing providers are dismayed at the decision, but the Tamaki Regeneration Company says they've got the interests of the tenants at heart. Also, nearly 2/3 of people are getting the wrong payments. Those are people on social benefits. What is the government doing about it? And more after 5.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat and tēnei. The government has revealed 40% of people receiving Working for Families payments are being underpaid and about 25% are getting too much. It also says the collection of billions of dollars in unpaid child support is being hampered by financial penalties hitting people running just a little behind in their payments. Our political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
The Finance Minister, Stephen Joyce, says Inland Revenue's social payment system needs fixing. He says the government wants real-time information about people's incomes so it can more accurately determine their entitlements and obligations. Every year, he says about 80,000 New Zealanders end up owing money to Inland Revenue because they've been paid too much for working for families. The government is also proposing to deduct child support payments from parents' pay automatically. From Parliament, Benedict Collins.
One of the country's largest social housing projects is set to be taken over by an Australian housing group after the New Zealand providers failed to make the shortlist. The Tamaki Housing Association currently manages nearly 2,800 former Housing New Zealand homes in East Auckland. Several Australian and New Zealand community housing providers pitched in for the tenancy management business, but only 2 were shortlisted, both Australian. Community Housing Aotearoa says it's dismayed at the decision, but the owner, Tamaki Regeneration Company, says none of the New Zealand housing groups are large enough for the project. In the United States, 9 people are dead and 1 is missing after flash flooding swept away a family at a swimming hole in central Arizona. The police say 14 family members were in the Verde River, about 145 kilometres northeast of Phoenix, when heavy rains caused flash floods. 6 children between the ages of 2 and 13 are reported to be among the dead. A privacy lawyer says people should expect their emails to elected councillors to be scrutinised by council officials. The Horowhenua District Council's chief executive has admitted some emails have been redirected to him, saying it's necessary to protect his staff from abusive correspondence. The lawyer Catherine Dalzell says intercepting mail is justified as long as it's not done in secret. Ms Dalzell says when people contact a council, that information becomes a matter of public record and must be managed and archived.
People should have access to their elected representative. However, they can't expect that to be without any control or mechanisms in place to manage it. So your local councillors will be receiving lots of emails. There should be some administration around that, and people should expect that.
A privacy lawyer, Catherine Dalzell. The police have begun a criminal investigation into one of the 2 fires that ravaged Christchurch's Port Hills. The fires, several kilometres apart, started on February the 13th, the first on Early Valley Road, the other on Marley's Hill. 2 days later, they combined into one massive blaze that gutted 11 houses and forced thousands of people to evacuate their homes. The police say investigations have found the cause of the Marley's Hill fire is suspicious. The fire service investigation into the Early Valley Road fire is continuing. A police officer in the United States has shot dead an Australian woman who called 911 after hearing a noise near her home. The woman, who has been named as Justin Damon, who ran meditation workshops at the Lake Harriet Spiritual Community in Minneapolis. The 40-year-old had lived in the US for 3 years and was due to marry next month. Her 22-year-old stepson, Zach Damon, says she called the police after hearing something in an alleyway close to their home.
My mom is dead because the police officer shot her for reasons I don't know, and I demand answers.
The dead woman's stepson, Zach Damon. The city's mayor, Betsy Hodges, says she's heartsick and deeply disturbed by the incident. Tributes are pouring in for the man who created the zombie movie. The horror film director, George Romero, has died, aged 77, from lung cancer. He had his first success in 1968 with the low-budget zombie classic Night of the Living Dead, which spawned a whole new genre of films. Speaking a few years ago, he questioned the authenticity of more recent zombie movies.
Zombies cannot run. I say this definitively, as the grandfather or the godfather of zombies. Zombies cannot run. So anyone who has a zombie running, don't listen to that person. Their ankles would snap. I mean, you know, what did they do? Go and join a spa the moment they rose from the dead? Give me a break.
The architect of the zombie movie, George Romero, and he should know. In a tribute on Twitter, the comedian Jim Norton has written, "Bad news is George Romero died. Good news is he probably won't stay dead for long." It's 5:05. To sport, and the New Zealand men's softball team have won their 7th World Championship title after beating Australia 6-4 in the final. New Zealand's Joel Evans hit a Grand Slam home run to set up the win. Black Sox coach Mark Sorensen says he had a feeling Evans was capable of something special in the lead up to his home run.
When you look at it, that loaded bases, full count, final of the World Series, I mean, it's stuff of fairy tales. You could just see the emotion on Joel as he was running around the bases. And, you know, he's a real baller and you know, really proud of the way that he hung tough and got a great outcome there.
Mark Sorensen. The Hurricanes coach Chris Boyd expects to have some key players back for their quarter-final game against the Brumbies on Friday. The Hurricanes lost Beauden Barrett to a virus and Vince Asor to warm-up strain just before Saturday night's victory over the Crusaders. Boyd says both players should be available for the Brumbies game, along with their long sideline skipper Dane Coles.
What going to Canberra on Tuesday for us means is we've got a couple of days to sort those things out. So I think that'll all happen. I think the good news is that Dane Coles will probably be on the plane as well.
Chris Boyd, that's the news.
What? If Wins does an investigation, of course I will pay the money back. And I expect that I will hear from them in time. But I'm in a position where I can do that.
Where? Obviously make amends of doing it in the visiting room, which, of course, lots of inmates have done over the past.
And who?
There's been a female doctor who's been talked about since 1980 when Tom Baker left, so it's been, 37 years to get here. I'm thrilled. The time's right for it. It's great. I think it's going to be a shot in the arm for the series.
All the hard questions here on Morning Report, weekdays 6 to 9.
Then on 9 to noon, the cost of sunshine, putting a price tag on sun-kissed versus shady homes. And after 10, we meet West Coast dairy farmer Katie Milne, the first woman in Federated Farmers' history to become its president. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. A few showers tonight, turning to rain for a time tomorrow, possibly heavy in Northland. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, patchy rain in Hawke's Bay, spreading north tomorrow and clearing from the south. Waitomo to Kapiti and Wairarapa, including the central high country. Rain, some heavy falls, clearing overnight and becoming mainly fine tomorrow. Wellington and Marlborough Sounds, showers clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. For the remainder of Marlborough Canterbury, Nelson, Buller and Westland, scattered showers clearing in the west this evening and elsewhere tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, remaining showers clearing this afternoon, leaving cloudy periods. Mainly fine tomorrow, but patchy drizzle along the Fiordland coast and Stewart Island. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, rain tomorrow, easing to showers later. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora, Katrina. It's one of the biggest housing projects in New Zealand and it's about to be taken over by Australians. Tamaki Housing Association manages nearly 2,800 ex-state homes in East Auckland. When its owner, Tamaki Regeneration Company, called for tenders to take over the tenancy management business earlier this year, 11 Australian and New Zealand housing providers pitched. But just 2 Australian groups have been shortlisted, Compass and Horizon. No New Zealand companies have made the cut. Scott Figgenshow is the Chief Executive of Community Housing Aotearoa, which represents most local housing providers. I asked him why this housing project is so important.
Well, what's at stake here is not a major shift, but remember, this is about the governance and ongoing management of the Tamaki Housing Association, which was set up to be operating the social housing that forms part of the Tamaki Regeneration. And I guess one of the continuing questions that we have through this process is how this is going to deliver governance and deliver ongoing, really, management and control of the housing in Tamaki by Tamaki locals.
So are local community housing groups disappointed that no New Zealand housing group has got to the shortlist?
Yeah, I think it's a surprise that, while there were 4 parties originally, that I think that it's a surprise that some of the longer-standing organizations were not on the short list. Compass is currently operating in New Zealand and has set up a New Zealand company, so that's certainly one part of the mix. But we've also got some, longer-standing providers in Emerge Aotearoa and New Zealand Housing Foundation that have been doing the hard yards in this space for a very long period of time, and have also done all the things asked of them around stepping up, working at larger scale. So we thought it was a surprise to see that that neither of them were also included in the parties that are continuing to be bidding.
Why would the Australians have the edge on this one?
Well, that's a very good question, and we would have thought that the parameters around ensuring the outcomes in Tamaki would have been such a strong driver. But we don't know what was actually being considered as this was going through. So those are things that we won't know until the final decisions are made, and that we all then learn how will the interests of Greater Tamaki and around ensuring that we have really strong governance that's going to make sure that the outcomes in Tamaki continue to be in the best interest of Tamaki long term. So we're all going to have to wait and see what the final decisions are around that.
One of the groups that I spoke to, one of the New Zealand groups that I spoke to earlier, said that this would have been a great opportunity to grow the New Zealand community housing sector. So they are really disappointed. Would that be one of the key factors here?
Yeah, well, we continue to have that question about, where is the commitment to growing the New Zealand community housing sector? We've, for years have been told through this housing reform program that these are the kinds of opportunities that are going to be the places where we can see new capital injected, we can see the right settings for growth, and when we see providers, stepping up to the plate to put their best foot forward on these aspects, where it just is surprising that we're not seeing that come through this selection.
So, do you feel that Tamaki Regeneration Company is just paying lip service to this?
Look, I can't speak to what their process is and their decisions. That's for them to comment on. Again, we just see that there's opportunities to continue to make sure that we're looking after the best interests of tenants, that we're about also doing really good community development and community building. And I think for us that also means growing the capacity within our communities to govern and manage the very entities that we need to see grow to scale. So we just would have thought there was a huge opportunity to achieve that in Tamaki, and maybe there still will be. Like I say, this is just a step in a very long process, and our main concerns have always been that the tendering processes that we're using to achieve these changes in the social housing space, these processes aren't really rooted in genuine community development. There are ways that this could be done that would be very different. And again, I think that's where our dismay comes in, is that we really thought we were trying to achieve a whole lot of really strong long-range community development, and the process we need to do that needs to look different than the one we've got. We've been saying that for a very long period of time.
But Scott, does it really matter that a foreign group, in this case Australians, are going to be landlords of social housing tenants? I mean, as long as they have the interests of the tenants at heart, does that matter?
Well, we think it does matter, because we think ultimately that we are in such a housing crisis in New Zealand that we need every penny of resource redeployed for more housing, better services, and to do a really good job at this. And anytime we're also trying to pay a dividend that may be going offshore, that's money that we thought would need to stay in New Zealand. So, maybe there's a way that providers are structuring themselves from overseas so that that's achieved. We just don't know what that is. Look, and I think we need to be mindful that ownership and that governance does matter. So we just think there's a really strong opportunity to see that coming through more strongly. And look, we pay a dividend on overseas capital already that we get through our bank. So separating where the capital comes from and where the provider is based, we think is one of the ways to do that. New Zealand's had a long history, though, of some strong international organizations delivering for New Zealanders. The Salvation Army, Habitat for Humanity, and Abbey Field are all organizations that also have international connections. But we think one of the differences is that those organizations were ultimately set up for the local delivery by a bunch of Kiwis who said, we want to bring that international model to New Zealand. And I don't know that we see that same case happening in the social housing sector yet, when we have strong New Zealand organisations also stepping up to the plate.
And that's Scott Figgenshow from Community Housing Aotearoa, and we'll hear from Tamaki Regeneration Company after 6. To other news now, and a woman who was helping her childhood friend move house has described hearing a loud bang before turning to see a 2-year-old girl had been shot in the head. Anna Leo told the High Court in Auckland she didn't think anything was wrong until she heard other children crying. Her friend Gustav Otto Sampt has admitted having the sawn-off shotgun illegally, but denied a charge of manslaughter relating to the death of his 2-year-old daughter Amokura Daniel Sampt. Sampt has been weeping throughout much of the evidence today. Our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
Anna Leao has known Mr Sampt since the pair were running around Sunday school in nappies. She told the court she and her partner Jimmy Tikoi Namaka were helping Mr Sampt and his family move house on June the 2nd last year. Miss Leao said she hugged Mr Sampt's children, who she considers to be like her nieces and nephews, before walking up the driveway away from the house.
I heard a big bang. I'm from a household of loud noises, so I didn't think anything of it, and it didn't frighten me or anything at the time.
Miss Leao said she realised something had happened when the children started crying.
As I turned around, Gustav was going towards the couches, and that's when I realised that Amo had died. My niece and nephew were crying, calling out to their dad and Amo. When I saw Gussie pick her up, I didn't click on that there was something more to it.
Miss Leao said Mr Sampt held his daughter and called out her name. Earlier, the Crown prosecutor Katie Hogan said the Crown accepts Mr Sampt never intended to harm his 2-year-old daughter, Amokura.
It seems that the victim, Amokura, was playing up or jumping on one of the couches, and that Mr Sampt became angry or frustrated with her. The Crown says that he pointed the gun at her, perhaps intending only to scare her, and then pulled the trigger. The gun fired.
Miss Hogan said Amokura was shot just above her left eye and died.
Mr Sampt immediately dropped the shotgun and picked up Amokura. He was significantly distressed.
Miss Hogan said police and ambulance arrived a short time later.
Mr Sampt made a number of spontaneous comments to one of the first officers at the scene, Constable Kanai. He said, "I pulled the trigger. She was just playing up. I f***ed up. What have I done?"
Miss Hogan said when Mr Sampt's partner, Julia Daniels, arrived home, Mr Sampt told her he had shot Amokura. The prosecutor said Mr Sampt failed to take all precautions. The gun was loaded, the safety catch was off, and he pointed it at his daughter and pulled the trigger. But Mr Sampt's lawyer, Phil Hamlin, said the gun fired accidentally without his client pulling the trigger. Mr Hamlin said Mr Sampt was waiting for his partner to return to the house with a skip, and he planned to throw the gun away.
His knowledge of the gun was that it was useless, didn't work, and as far as he knew, not loaded.
Mr Hamlin said Mr Sampt was holding the gun to keep it away from the children. He said the gun can go off without squeezing the trigger, and the court would hear expert evidence on that point.
Mr Sampt does not get the blame, as it were, for what happened and the killing of his daughter. The gun does.
The trial before Justice Venning and a jury is set down for 3 weeks. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gay aho.
It's coming up to 5:20. Coming up next, the man who's been waiting 3 years for an eye appointment in Dunedin, and the 70-year-old who spent 3 days stuck in a camper van. Don't forget, you can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. And don't forget you can watch us online on Facebook Live at rnz.co.nz/checkpoint, on Freeview Channel 50 and on Face TV Sky Channel 83. Well, the Ministry of Social Development won't say whether it will take action against the Greens co-leader Metiria Ture after she admitted to benefit fraud as a solo mother 24 years ago. Mrs Ture made the revelation yesterday while she was announcing the Green Party's $1.5 billion families package. Sarah Robson reports it's prompted questions about whether she should be prosecuted or if she should pay the money back.
In Dunedin, where Metiria Ture lives, voters were split on what they thought of her admission.
I understand people are in situations that sometimes that happens, so I don't know really. I don't like it, but it's just the way it is, isn't it?
Yeah, well, if she needed to and if that was the only way she could support her kids, I don't think there's a big deal.
Well, if she said that 23 years ago, well, that's too long ago. She should have been talking about something was happening in the last 12 months if she wants to attack the system as it is now.
She didn't need to admit it, but she did, and that says a lot to me. I reckon that's something I admire. Not the fact she did it, not the fact that she's coming out and being like, hey, I'm human, I did that, that's something I did.
The ACT Party leader, David Seymour, says Metiria Ture should do the right thing.
Absolutely she should pay it back, but what really gets people is this. She said she'd pay it back if she's asked. Well, here you go, Metiria. On behalf of taxpayers, I'm asking you to pay it back now. Will you do it?
The Deputy Prime Minister, Paula Bennett, was asked whether she had lied to work and income while she was receiving a sole parent benefit.
I mean, I was off and on benefit. I had jobs and I was always trying to get off when I was on because I wanted to work and didn't want to be on a benefit. But no, I didn't deliberately lie. I didn't lie to them as such about my circumstances.
Didn't deliberately lie?
Well, I didn't lie. I didn't lie to them about my circumstances.
Okay. The United Future leader, Peter Dunn, says Metiria Ture's admission is just political point scoring.
I think it's a pretty sad state of affairs when one feels the need to sort of go out there and say, look, hey, I did this all those years ago. I don't think it's anything to be proud of, and I don't really think there was much point to it.
Peter Dunn says while he's astounded, he doesn't think Metiria Ture should be prosecuted because that would be vindictive. Regardless, questions remain about whether there are even grounds for charges to be laid. Wellington barrister Graham Edgecumbe says it's not clear if Mrs Ture actually received money that she wasn't entitled to.
The answer might be that, in fact, it didn't make a difference to the amount she was entitled to at all. She might have been entitled and receiving the maximum even with the lower rent amount.
Graham Edgecumbe says it's also not clear whether Metiria Ture falsely filled out a form or whether she just neglected to tell Work and Income about a change in her circumstances.
If it was just a failure to ring up WINS and tell them my rent is now lower, that probably couldn't be Crimes Act fraud charge. It would be a Social Security Act charge. And it is probably too late to lay one of those.
There's no time limit for laying fraud charges under the Crimes Act. But Graham Edgecumbe says if there was a prosecution for falsely filling out an application form, there would have to be proof that that had happened, and that would mean there would still have to be a copy of the application form 24 years later. In a statement, the Ministry of Social Development said it cannot comment on individual cases. But it said that when it is told that someone has taken advantage of the support available, the Ministry will look into it through its normal processes. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
It's been revealed that nearly 2/3 of people getting working for families are getting the wrong payments. The government says 40% of those receiving working for families payments are being underpaid and about 25% are getting too much. It also says the collection of billions of dollars in unpaid child support is being hampered by financial penalties hitting people running just a little behind in their payments. The Finance Minister Stephen Joyce says the problems are being caused by Inland Revenue's social payment system, which he says needs fixing. At Parliament this afternoon, he outlined the government's proposal to seek real-time information about people's incomes so it can more accurately determine their entitlements and obligations.
And it's based around the idea that we're getting more regular information from people and making sure that it's linked to their most current actual income information rather than getting them to project out a year. At the moment we have something like 80,000 people each year that end up in debt to the IRD because of working for families overpayments. And it's a significant sum of money each year, so this will give us the opportunity to change that, and that's what we're putting out for consultation today. One of the difficulties we've got at the moment is that we're asking people effectively to estimate their income over the year ahead, which is okay if you're on a salary or a 40-hour-a-week wage, but many people have more variable incomes, and that's where it gets very hard. What we're certainly seeking to do is make sure that less people get into debt trouble where they actually end up having to pay back money to the IRD.
And the Revenue Minister Judith Collins says the way child support payments are handled need changing too. She wants payments to be deducted on payday rather than determined at the end of the month or year.
The last thing we want is for people to get behind in their child support. Number one, you get behind your child support, you're not contributing to your child's upbringing in terms of financial upbringing. But also you get yourself into a penalty situation, which we're trying to make sure that we won't end up with people in massive penalties to revenue on child support. We have some pretty horrendous debts out there.
How much money are you owed in child support payments at the moment?
Oh, billions of dollars in terms of it, about $1 billion overseas. It's a big amount of money, and the trouble with child support is that some of that is actual penalties. And a lot of that will never be recovered because it's just got to such huge levels. I think the latest figure I saw, the worst figure for one particular person, was over $4 million owed, and a lot of that was penalties.
The proposal would also increase the range of employment income eligible for student loan repayments. Submissions are open until mid-September. A Dunedin man who has been trying to get an eye appointment at Dunedin Hospital for 3 years says the health system has turned its back on him because he is old. John Elsey from Mosgiel is 83 and losing his sight because of cataracts. And he'll likely lose his driver's licence next year unless he pays for private surgery to remove them. But he believes he should not have to. Here's our Otago Southland reporter Ian Telfer.
John Elsey knows his eyesight's getting worse, and he's reminded 3 times a week when he plays golf.
When I set the golf ball, I've got to have everybody in the 4 watch and see where the ball's going. I can see it start off, but that's the finish of it, you know.
Well, I was going to ask you that.
Hole-in-ones and never seen it go down the hole yet.
It's been slowly happening for years, but it's getting worse now. Since 2014, he's been trying to get referred for an appointment with an eye specialist at Dunedin Hospital, but he keeps getting letters saying his case has been assessed as routine and there's not enough medical staff to see him. Friends and his optometrist have told him the only way is to go to a private specialist, costing between $4,000 and $10,000 for both eyes. Mr. Elsey's not happy.
Pissed off. Yeah, no, I get wild about it, really. Well, I've been working since I was 15, so we used to pay Social Security, and I paid taxes all the way through. I was in my own business for 10 years, and they know how to tax you.
Mr. Elsey gave up his health insurance when he retired more than 20 years ago because he couldn't afford it. He says he's been patient, but the public health system has let him down.
Maybe if I was 20 years younger, they'd look at me. Well, that's the thing. The feeling I get is just because one of the reasons is because I'm a bit older, and they just, hopefully you'll die soon.
Not a priority.
No.
Mr. Elsey says he can pay, but should not have to. He says friends have told him the only way he'll get anywhere is calling every day, but he says that's not working. Mr. Elsey says he's tried a few times, but was politely but firmly told there was no show of him getting an appointment.
I know what I'll end up doing. I don't want to do it. I've got my knickers in a twist, and I'm not bloody going to do it, you know.
But you think this is going to lead to you going private?
Well, I would have to, wouldn't I, because I have no licence. If I have no licence, how do I get over to the golf club? How do I do my shopping? How do I get over and have a beer with Brian?
John Elsey's friend Brian, who faces becoming John's driver, says the situation's unfair, but seems to be widespread.
John's one person, but the numbers of people that pass comments about this sort of thing to John is really amazing. They just don't want to know you.
Late last year, the Southern District Health Board admitted a massive backlog of eye appointments for 3,500 patients, which caused partial or full blindness for 14 people. it's been urgently working to catch up. The DHB wouldn't discuss Mr Elsey's personal situation today, nor explain why he can't get a referral to the hospital. But it says routine cases are handled by an optometrist and they can make referrals to the hospital specialist. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
An elderly Paeroa man spent 3 days and 2 cold nights stuck in the cab of his camper van before being rescued. The 70-year-old is now in Waikato Hospital. Andrew McRae reports.
Emergency services got the call just after 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon to come to a caravan park in Paeroa. Fire Station Officer Paul Jackson says one of the man's neighbours had become concerned having not seen him for a while and went to investigate and then called for help. He says they found the man wedged between the driver's and passenger's seat and the centre console and gear stick of the camper van.
From where I was looking, it looked like he'd sort of slipped as he was going from the front to the back somehow, because it was just a normal motorhome that they rent out in New Zealand, one of those sort of style, not a big one. So he'd slipped on something and his body's just gone from underneath him. He's got his foot stuck under the clutch pedal and he's jammed himself down. He had no room to move, so he was stuck there for a couple of days apparently.
He says the elderly man would have had difficulty manoeuvring himself.
And he was a slightly larger gentleman, but not too big. But yeah, just where he was wedged, it was made it difficult for us to get him out. But we got there in the end.
Paul Jackson says his officers and ambulance staff worked in a fairly confined space, but they didn't have to dismantle the camper van.
When they put pain relief in, we could get strops and stuff underneath him to actually lift him straight up and then out through the side door. He had leg and hip injuries, so they were a little bit concerned about those. And then he got choppered out to Waikato.
Westpac Rescue paramedic Carl Taylor was on board the chopper.
He sustained significant soft tissue injuries to his limbs. He was conscious and alert, but he was very cold and obviously quite a bit of pain.
Wayne Francis from the Paeroa RV Centre says the man's family has asked for privacy. He won't comment, describing it as a family matter. The man's recovering in Waikato Hospital's high dependency unit, where his condition is described as serious. For Checkpoint, ko Andrew McRae tēnei.
Coming up, a tale of 2 deciles. We delve into the lives of 2 9-year-old girls attending schools at opposite ends of the socio-economic spectrum. And the first female to play Doctor Who is urging fans not to be scared by her gender. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
It's been revealed 40% of people receiving Working for Families payments are being underpaid and about 25% are getting too much. The government also says the collection of billions of dollars in unpaid child support is being hampered by financial penalties hitting people running just a little behind in their payments. Australians are set to take over one of the country's largest social housing projects. Several community housing providers put in bids to manage nearly 2,800 former state homes in East Auckland, but the only 2 shortlisted were both from across the Tasman. A privacy lawyer says people should expect emails to elected councillors to be scrutinised by council officials. The Honowhenua District Council's chief executive has admitted some emails have been redirected to him, saying it's necessary to protect staff from abusive correspondence. An eyewitness has told a court he saw the handle of a sawn-off shotgun protruding from his friend's pants shortly before a 2-year-old girl was shot in the face. The Crown says Gustav Otto Santh failed in his duty of care when he pointed a loaded shotgun at his daughter without the safety catch on and pulled the trigger. Mr Santh has admitted having the sawn-off shotgun illegally but denies the manslaughter of his daughter Amakura Daniel Santh in June last year. A criminal investigation has begun into a destructive fire on Christchurch's Port Hills. 2 fires several kilometres apart started in February and combined 2 days later, destroying 11 houses and forcing thousands of people to evacuate their homes. Police now say one of the fires was suspicious. A police officer in the US has shot dead an Australian woman who called 911 after hearing a noise near her home. The Minneapolis mayor says she's heartsick and deeply disturbed by the incident. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Kia ora, Katrina. Turning to business now with Nona Peltier. And Nona, if inflation figures due out tomorrow, so what's the market expecting?
Well, we're looking at a drop in the annual inflation rate to about 1.9% from 2.2% the previous quarter. And that sort of reflects the much higher food costs versus lower fuel costs. And yeah, so I guess that means that the expectation is that the Reserve Bank's forecast of looking at interest rates, increases of interest rates back probably mid-2019 is what Reserve Bank was saying. Others were saying it's going to be sooner, but if the inflation numbers are lower, it's looking pretty good for those interest rates holding steady for a while longer. And that's really, I guess, flowing through to consumer sentiment as well. We had a survey out today from a company called Home Loans. It's a lender. It says like 2,000 homeowners are expecting interest rates to hold steady, and that is fueling, well, I don't want to say reckless spending, but unplanned spending. So what, 58%, I believe, nearly 58% are not expecting interest rates to rise. So they're spending up on all sorts of things, and not necessarily, you know, long-term items. These are like, you know, entertainment, cigarettes, alcohol, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I guess for a while we're going to see interest rates remaining at a steady level. At least that's the expectation.
Oh, good news. And what's been happening on the markets today?
Well, big day on the markets, as a matter of fact. Yes, indeed. Yes, we broke a record today.
Another record.
Yeah, we're up 50 points. That's almost 0.7% to 7,700. Nice round number for us to remember. And the markets generally are at a high. That's in Wall Street, and also Asia's got a very strong tone. So the expectation is that there's a lot of momentum there. The reporting season's coming, but hey, no one's really expecting very many surprises. So maybe interest rates low, and the markets at a high. So, yeah, pretty good for an economic story. And our dollar is just slightly weaker today. Now, stronger or been holding steady pretty much against the U.S. at 73.3 U.S. cents. A little bit lower against the Australian, which is at a 2-year high. Go figure, we're at 93.8 there, and 56 British pence.
Oh, there you go. Thank you very much, Nona. That's our business reporter, Nona Peltier. Children at schools in poor communities have long lagged behind those in richer areas. From reading and maths to behaviour, low decile schools generally have worse results than high decile ones, though the gap is closing. As part of RNZ's election year series, Is This the Brighter Future?, John Gerritsen spent a day with 2 girls attending schools at opposite ends of the decile spectrum.
It's just after 8 in the morning and 9-year-old Hazel is being dropped at school by her mum Sarah.
Okay, so you're going to go have some breakfast?
Yes.
Okay then. Let's kiss.
Bye, Mum.
Have a great day, eh?
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Hazel goes to Decile 1 Marairoa School in Porirua, where all but 4 of the 124 pupils are Maori or Pacifica.
Morena koutou.
Morena, Miss Arthur. My mum's a social worker and my dad's a removal guy. He lifts up furniture, yeah. I watch a lot of TV. I know that's not good for me, but I just really like TV. I am a Cook Islander and I respect my language, so I try to speak it this year, but I'm not really sure about it. I'll learn.
25 kilometres south in central Wellington, another girl is starting her school day.
My name is Sienna. I am 9 and I go to Kaiki School. My brother, he's 7, and then I've got another younger one who's 4. Usually in my spare time I do lots of reading and writing. I write stories too.
Clyde Key is a Decile 10 school of 240 children from a wide range of ethnicities. Sienna's father is English and her mother is Australian. He works in IT and she works 3 days a week for a big accounting firm.
After school on a Monday I have violin and technique swimming, and then on a Tuesday I've got gymnastics, which is from 4 till 7, and then on Wednesday...
Sienna has sport or violin every day except Sunday. She wishes she could fit more in and she enjoys school.
I really like the fact that we get to choose our own learning, but reading's my particular favourite. I really would like to do more, like I'd really like to try basketball and maybe like dancing, but there's just not enough time in the week.
Back in Cannons Creek, Hazel also likes reading and school.
Everything's enjoyable at school. It teaches me and it challenges my brain. Yeah, that's what I like about school. I don't read a lot at home, but I read for my mahi kainga. I like reading about extinct dinosaurs.
The girls' classrooms are similar, with 2 teachers overseeing 2 classes of children working in small groups. However, most pupils at Marairoa School are below or well below the national standards in reading, writing and maths, while at Clyde Key most are at standard or above. National monitoring shows children attending decile 1 to 3 schools are on average 2 years of schooling behind their high decile peers across most subjects.
Okay, so that's 16 divided by 3. Okay, that didn't work either.
Both girls have maths and fitness this morning. Then Hazel's class has free milk and apples, and she helps new entrants with their reading.
So Uncle Kokala is getting married on.
Hazel says education is important, and she wants a well-paid job when she grows up.
I would like to be an actor, a dancer and a singer. Those are my 3 tops, and a doctor, because they get paid a lot.
Sienna has also been thinking about her future.
When I first thought about getting a job, I really wanted to be a vet. Now I think I'd probably like to be a sports doctor or a lawyer.
Secondary school qualifications are the first step towards that. When National came to power, fewer than 50% of school leavers from decile 1 secondary schools had NCEA level 2 or higher. Now that's risen to 63%, though it's still a long way behind the 93% of decile 10 school leavers who have at least a level 2 qualification.
An apple, chocolate brownie, a sandwich, yogurt and popcorn.
At lunchtime, Sienna eats with her friends and then plays netball. Hazel has some rice crackers and then goes to Samoan dance practice. Marairoa's decile has risen slightly from 1A to 1B, but on average decile 1 schools' communities are worse off economically than they were 9 years ago. About 42% of children attending those schools now come from the poorest neighbourhoods, up from 38% in 2008.
Signs out! Check! Clear! Cross now!
After school, Hazel has crossing patrol duty, and then she and little sister Ria Grace walk home.
Okay, and we'll have swan, make sure shoulders are square, fingers are reaching past your toes, body is flat, and lovely point your foot on the front.
In Wellington, Sienna walks home with her brother Harrison and then goes to gymnastics. 2 girls from very different backgrounds, but both are hoping for a very bright future, regardless of which school they attend. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
The New Zealand First leader Winston Peters is being called a hypocrite by Tuku Roirangi Morgan, one of the men who won a Maori seat alongside him in 1996. That year, New Zealand First took all 5 Maori seats, but now Mr Peters wants a binding referendum on whether they should be abolished. Our Maori Issues correspondent Mahina Rangi-Forbes reports.
Flying New Zealand First's black and white flag, they were the tight 5, fresh faces to politics, vowing they'd take the Maori seats. Tau Henare, a former National MP, speaking here to Māori supporters of New Zealand First in 1996. Back then, Mr Henare and his colleagues Tuku Roirangi Morgan, Rana Waitai, Tu Tekawa Waili and Tuariki Delamere helped New Zealand First increase its seats dramatically, handing Winston Peters a mandate to choose who would become the government. Mr Peters is polling in a similar manner, but his position on the Māori seats has changed. The Māori Party's president, Tuku Roirangi Morgan, says Mr Peters is behaving like a hypocrite, and Mana Party leader Hone Harawira agrees.
I recall particularly how big was the smile on Winston's face at the time. It quickly disappeared when they all ditched him and went to National, but I mean, that might be the source of his displeasure, the fact that he couldn't trust his own members to stay with him, just like you can't trust Shane to stay with the policy that he's outlined.
Maori first had 4 seats in Parliament in 1867 when some viewed Maori unfit to vote. Despite being landowners, Maori didn't qualify for a vote as they didn't fit the colonial model of holding individual title. So 4 seats were created to represent 50,000 Maori, while Pākehā at the time had 72 seats. Labour's campaign manager for the Maori seats, Willie Jackson, says Mr Peters is using the seats as a political football again.
Winston, at another time in his life, was very comfortable with the Maori seats. Now he's got a bit older, he's become uncomfortable. So he knows the strength of those seats, or he would never have stood in those seats.
Ruapehu Morgan says Mr Peters should expect a backlash if he presses ahead.
It will galvanise Māori around this country. There's no doubt about that. We saw that with the seabed foreshore, and you'll get the same kind of momentum, desperation, and reunification of our people. Winston thinks that this is a political time bomb, and it is absolutely a political time bomb because Māori will not sit in silence.
The Deputy Prime Minister Paula Bennett hopes for a day when there will be no need for the seats.
We've always said there'll be a time when one hopes we don't have to have the separate Maori seats. I'm a Māori woman that stood in a general seat and won that.
But Willie Jackson says a Maori person standing in a general seat doesn't represent Maori in the same manner as a Maori electorate MP.
That's just the reality. So the dangers of losing the Maori seats are that, in fact, we don't get the type of representation that we deserve or we should get every day.
2 weeks ago, New Zealand First's newest face, Shane Jones, told the Hui he agreed with the seats.
The Maori seats will subsist for as long as people of Maori extraction remain on them and want them to
so for the people
continue,
to decide.
But it's a kaupapa for the people to decide.
But on Morning Report, that caught his leader, Winston Peters, off guard.
But that was a long time ago. He wasn't a candidate for New Zealand First then.
It was earlier this month.
Yes, but he's a candidate for New Zealand First. No, it wasn't this month.
But it was this month, and other Māori MPs such as Greens co-leader Matiria Ture have jumped in behind Shane Jones.
On this matter, I agree with Shane Jones that that the Māori seats should remain for as long as Māori determine that they're necessary. We've done really well under MMP with Māori representation, but we have not improved the circumstances for Māori across the board yet.
Those who serve in the Māori seats are known as kanohi kitea, familiar faces, and without them many fair Māori will lose their unique voice in a parliament built to represent both Pākehā and Māori alike. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei ko Mihi Ngārangi Forbes, ahau.
A man who nearly severed his victim's hand with a machete has been jailed for 6.5 years. Australian Sean Roker pleaded guilty to wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm and assault for the attack on his former partner and her father. Our Otago Southland reporter Lydia Anderson was at the High Court in Dunedin for the sentencing today.
33-year-old Sean Roker exploded in a violent outburst in February this year. His lawyer Anne Stevens said Roker had separated from a Dunedin woman with whom he had 2 children and had gone to Australia. But he returned to Dunedin at her request because she was in a bad relationship, her life was in disarray and she needed his help.
Unfortunately, he arrived into a somewhat volatile situation. There were difficulties between the two of them, and that culminated in the events that he has pleaded guilty to.
Ms Stevens said Roker had only been back for a week when he and his ex-partner got into an argument when she accused him of taking drugs. Roker hit the woman twice about the head, and she told her father what he'd done. Justice Gendel said Roker and the older man got into a physical fight, and Roker was asked to leave their property. But instead he pulled a machete from his bag, a weapon he'd bought just days earlier.
He raised the machete above your head and brought it down on the male victim, who attempted to block it by raising his left hand to protect his head. The resulting blow from the machete severed the victim's hand just above the wrist. At this point you stopped your attack. The victims retreated inside to the bathroom within the house. You soon followed, continuing to shout at the female victim and smashing a window of the house with the machete.
Justice Gendel said at that point Roker displayed remorse and tried to apply a tourniquet to the victim's arm. However, his former partner's father needed extensive reconstructive surgery and it was not clear if he would ever recover.
Apparent in your offending is an extreme level of violence, exhibited in the manner of the attack and its consequences. There is, of course, the serious and potentially irreparable injury you caused to the victim. You severed his hand to the point where it was hanging by skin alone.
Justice Kendall acknowledged Roker quickly showed remorse for his actions and had pleaded guilty. He also noted Roker would be isolated in a New Zealand prison.
Ms Stevens, your counsel refers to the fact that your father has recently passed away and that much of your family will be located in Australia during the time you are incarcerated. The nature and consequences of your offending are such that effectively you are unlikely to be a part of the lives of your children and your former partner.
Justice Kendall sentenced Roker to 6 years and 6 months in prison and ordered him to pay $2,000 in reparations. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Lydia Anderson.
The first female to play Doctor Who is urging fans not to be scared by her gender. Broadchurch star Jodie Whittaker has been unveiled as the 13th Time Lord and the first female Doctor Who in the programme's history. Her identity was revealed in a trailer broadcast at the end of Wimbledon men's singles final. With more, here's the BBC's Lizo Mazimba.
Time travel show Doctor Who making history. Jodie Whittaker says she's overwhelmed as a feminist, as a woman and as an actor to be cast as the drama's first female Doctor. In the 6 months since Peter Capaldi announced he was stepping down from the role, there's been a huge amount of speculation about who his replacement will be when he regenerates in this year's Christmas special. Regeneration was first introduced on Doctor Who in the 1960s, an ingenious solution to the problem of how to continue a show after the departure of the actor playing its lead role. Since the show returned, it's consistently been one of the BBC's biggest hits, a successful combination of a proven sci-fi format and a charismatic lead actor. Expectation for the new Doctor is certain to be high. Do you think all fans will welcome a female Doctor?
I think most will. I think some won't be sure, but I think they should remember that Doctor Who is all about change, and this is potentially a really big, really exciting change to the show.
With the BBC having committed itself to greater diversity, it'll be hoping that today's announcement will not only excite viewers, but will also clearly demonstrate that the time travel show has moved firmly into the 21st century.
And that was the BBC's entertainment correspondent Lizo Mazimba reporting there. This week, the US President Donald Trump will mark 6 months in office. But if the latest poll is anything to go by, it might not be a milestone worth celebrating. With his administration bogged down in continuing questions over its connections with Russia and a failure to deliver on some big promises, the poll puts Mr Trump's approval rating at just 36%. That's lower than any other post-war president at the same point in office. With more from Washington, here's the ABC's Ben Knight.
At this point in their presidency, almost every leader since Harry Truman has still been enjoying the honeymoon, with approvals in the high 50s and up, according to the ABC News Washington Post poll. The exceptions are Gerald Ford, who just pardoned the disgraced Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton, who eventually recovered and left office with approval ratings at 66%. Now, Donald Trump has set a new record low of 36% approval and record high disapprovals of 58%. And from here, it's hard to see when or how he might stage a Bill Clinton-style comeback. Donald Trump is yet to sign any major piece of legislation, let alone on the key promise he made throughout the campaign.
We will be able to immediately repeal and replace Obamacare. Have to do it.
The healthcare bill is also deeply unpopular with voters, and right now it's hanging by a thread in the Senate. The White House says Donald Trump's been making calls all weekend, trying to convince wavering Republican senators to get behind it. But the president's also been preparing the ground to shift the blame to those senators if it fails.
But I'm sitting waiting for that bill to come to my desk. I hope that they do it. They've been promising it for years.
One of the key problems is that Donald Trump hasn't been out there campaigning for it, as he did so effectively during the election. His administration is under siege over his campaign team's contacts with Russian nationals, and they're constantly changing explanations of those meetings as new details are revealed almost daily. It's not just healthcare that's stalled in the White House. Everything from tax reform to North Korea is being swamped off Donald Trump's agenda. This was supposed to be his Made in America week, where he promotes local manufacturing. But even that's becoming a PR problem of the White House's own making. The Washington Post has revealed that Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka's fashion label relies exclusively on foreign factories, employing low-wage workers in countries like Bangladesh, Indonesia and China. But it's Russia that will once again dominate the news this week, as members of Donald Trump's campaign team, including possibly his son Donald Jr., begin appearing before congressional committees to answer questions about their contacts with Russian officials, and possibly doing it under oath. Republicans are now openly venting their frustration at the White House, like South Carolina's Trey Gowdy.
Someone close to the president needs to get everyone connected with that campaign in a room and say, from the time you saw Dr. Zhivago until the moment you drank vodka with a guy named Boris, you list every single one of those, and we're going to turn them over to the special counsel, because this drip, drip, drip is undermining the credibility of this administration.
And that was Republican Trey Gowdy ending that report from Ben Knight. Local knowledge and volunteers are credited with saving a skier's life after she became lost on Mount Ruapehu overnight. The woman had been skiing outside of the ski field boundary yesterday. Constable Conrad Smith says police got involved last night after a friend of the woman received a call from her. Search and rescue personnel and police, supported by a helicopter, spent hours in deep, fresh snow searching for the woman. But it was a team of local ski patrol volunteers which found and followed the woman's tracks.
They decided they'd go out to the western side of the ski field, where we were focusing most of our energy to the eastern side, because that's where the information sort of tended to make us think she was. And his team picked up some tracks and followed them and managed to track them for over 2 hours through the snow, down all the way down to that low altitude of about 1,400 metres. And when he got quite low on those tracks, we redeployed we got quite excited and thought it would be her, so we redeployed some of our other assets and off their clues, and we flew the helicopter down over them, and the helicopter found her down in a big gully, waving her arms frantically, trying to get their attention.
She must have been pretty relieved to see you.
He was hugely relieved. Like where she was, the team were a little bit cautious, didn't want to go down into it for their own safety. So it was great to have a helicopter there to do that. She was over the moon. She was ecstatic. She was freezing cold, and she herself was, like when I spoke to her this afternoon, she said if she had made it through the night, she doesn't know she would have even been able to make it back to the roof from where she was. So she was very relieved.
Do you think she would have made it through the night? I mean, that was, about 8 hours that she was stuck there?
Yeah, so we were quite concerned because there's some really bad weather coming in today, and if she was stuck there this morning, we wouldn't have been using helicopters. We would have had all on foot, and it would have been a lot more challenging with low visibility. So we threw everything we had at her last night to try and find her, and it would be, if she did make it through the night, she wouldn't have been in a very good way.
So after an 8-hour search, I mean, the searchers must have been pretty exhausted as well.
So we had all sorts of things to consider, because a lot of the searchers had been working on the mountain all day previously. So they'd been up ski patrolling and doing other jobs, Hillary Outdoors and at DOC, Department of Conservation, as well as the Ruapehu Up and Lift staff. So they'd been working all day themselves. Then we had fatigue issues to manage with them, sending them out into the field. And when we all went home early hours this morning, about 4:30, 5 o'clock this morning, we were all feeling a bit jaded, and those guys did a fantastic job out there.
And the woman who was rescued, is she a local woman?
No, she skied at Turo her whole life, so she's familiar with the area, and she's a competent skier. But she wasn't a local lady.
What do you think saved her in the end? Was it digging out the cave for herself?
No, what saved her was some fantastic volunteers, the Ruapehu Up and Rescue Organisation, that gave up their time and went out there and spent the night looking for her. They absolutely saved her life. They're the ones that some good local knowledge, tracking her down, and the helicopter being able to get in there and access to her and get her out. It's absolutely saved her life.
That was Constable Conrad Smith. Time for some feedback now on Materia Ture and her admission that she lied to receive a bigger benefit payment while she was a solo mother 24 years ago. Mike has texted in to say Ms Ture was honest in her admittance of fraud, but she should now face due process. To not go ahead with charging her would demonstrate a duplicit system. Her honesty and other possible mitigating factors would count in her favour, but she should be charged. And Gary says work and income staff must learn customer service and people skills, as many people are put off going there due to rude and arrogant behaviour from WIN staff. And Thomas is texted to say benefit troubles and mistakes. 3 government ministers have just come out and said the government departments got it wrong. Why then doesn't the government resign? And on the man who's been waiting for 3 years for an iron appointment in Dunedin. More on that after 6.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanahu. The government has revealed 40% of people receiving Working for Families payments are being underpaid and about 25% are getting too much. It also says the collection of billions of dollars in unpaid child support is being hampered by financial penalties, hitting people running just a little behind in their payments. The Finance Minister, Stephen Joyce, says Inland Revenue's social payment system needs fixing. He says the government wants real-time information about people's incomes so it can more accurately determine their entitlements and obligations. He says every year, he says, about 80,000 New Zealanders end up owing money to Inland Revenue because they've been paid too much for working for families. The government is also proposing to deduct child support payments from parents' pay automatically. One of the country's largest social housing projects is set to be taken over by an Australian housing group after the New Zealand providers failed to make the shortlist. The Tamaki Housing Association has nearly 2,800 former Housing New Zealand homes in East Auckland. Several Australian and New Zealand community housing providers pitched for the tenancy management business, but only 2 were shortlisted, both Australian. The project's owner, Tamaki Regeneration Company, says none of the New Zealand housing groups are large enough for the project. The head of Community Housing Aotearoa, Scott Figgenshow, told Checkpoint it doesn't show commitment to growing the country's community housing sector.
We've also got some longer-standing providers in Emerge Aotearoa and New Zealand Housing Foundation that have been doing the hard yards in this space for a very long period of time and have also done all the things asked of them around stepping up, working at larger scale. So we thought it was a surprise to see that neither of them were also included.
Scott Figgenshow says for years they've been told these types of opportunities will help inject new capital. An Auckland jury has heard how a man saw the handle of a sawn-off shotgun protruding from his friend's pants shortly before a 2-year-old was shot in the face. Gustav Otto Santh, who admits having the shotgun illegally, has pleaded not guilty to the manslaughter of his daughter Amokura Daniel Santh. Edward Gay has been in the High Court in Auckland.
Witness Jimmy Tukoinamaka told the court he and his partner went to the Sanft home in Mangere to help him move house in June last year. Mr Tukoinamaka said when he pulled up in the driveway, he noticed a taped-up handle sticking out of Mr Sanft's pants. He said he was reaching for a cigarette lighter in his car when he heard a loud bang. Mr Sanft called out to him for help and he saw blood everywhere. Mr Tukoinamaka confirmed the handle he saw was similar to that of a shotgun exhibited in court. The Crown says Mr Sanft failed in his duty of care when he pointed a loaded shotgun at his daughter without the safety catch on and pulled the trigger. Mr Sanft's lawyers say the gun went off accidentally. Atu i te kōti mātua ko Edward Gay aho.
Horowhenua's mayor and his council's chief executive are once again at odds, this time over the latter's ability to intercept emails sent to the organisation, including councillors. RNZ News has obtained part of an internal audit indicating that people or organisations on a blacklist have had their emails diverted to the chief executive, David Clapperton. However, Mr Clapperton says redirecting the emails has been necessary to protect his staff from abusive correspondence. He says all parties knew the emails were being redirected at the time. The Mayor, Michael Fayen, says Mr Clapperton has asked him to resign, and it appears the Chief Executive is blaming him for releasing the audit report. Mr Fayen says he didn't leak the report and felt anxious going into his mayoral office today. Mr Clapperton says the internal audit report is incomplete and is now being peer-reviewed by KPMG. A Paeroa man is recovering in Waikato Hospital after becoming stuck in a camper van for 3 days. The 70-year-old was rescued by emergency services yesterday afternoon. He'd fallen over inside the van, which was in a camper van park in Paeroa, and became trapped. Fire Station Officer Paul Jackson says they found the man wedged between the driver and passenger seat.
He'd slipped on something and, his body's just gone from underneath him. He's got his foot stuck under the clutch pedal and he's jammed himself down. He had no room to move.
Paul Jackson says it took about half an hour to free the man. The police say a skier who got lost on Mount Ruapehu spent hours inside a snow cave trying to keep warm. The woman had been skiing outside the ski field boundary and didn't arrive at a ski lodge where she'd been due to meet a friend. A rescue team, including the police, volunteers, ski patrol and a helicopter, swept the mountain and eventually found her at 2:30 this morning. Constable Conrad Smith told Checkpoint she was exhausted after wading through waist-deep snow, and hard work by the rescue team saved her life.
She had sort of found herself a little hole in the snow, like a little bit of a cave, and she crawled into that under some trees, trying to keep herself warm. But she only had just her day's ski gear on. She had nothing with her to keep herself insulated from the snow or to keep herself warm, other than just her ski jacket and pants.
Conrad Smith says the woman is a competent skier who had skied at Turoa all her life. It's 6:05. To sport, the Warriors playmaker Shaun Johnson is expected to miss only up to 8 weeks of the NRL season after scans revealed the knee injury he suffered against Penrith isn't as bad as first thought. The Warriors are 11th on the NRL ladder after Friday's loss and face the 6th place North Queensland Cowboys on Saturday night. The New Zealand men's softball team have continued their dominance at the World Championships in Canada, winning their 7th title with a 6-4 win over Australia in the final. And the Hurricanes assistant coach John Plumtree says travel will be one of the biggest hurdles for New Zealand teams in the run-up to this year's Super Rugby title. The Hurricanes face the Brumbies in Canberra later this week, and like the Chiefs and potentially the Crusaders and the Highlanders, will have to travel to South Africa if they're to win the competition.
I don't really think this competition's been won from a travelling side before, so the challenge is there for someone to stand up and do it for the first time, I guess. The challenge for a team this year that's got to go to South Africa is to be able to kick on and win it back in New Zealand.
John Plumtree, that's the news.
This week on Nights, the Aussie environmental scientist James Watson, who says reports of the salvation of the Great Barrier Reef are premature. We are all aboard the Decimal Express, the secret train that transported our new dollars and cents around the nation 50 years ago. David Parsons has been researching the story, and Sarah Peverley on becoming a mermaid. It's all the rage in the Northern Hemisphere. On Nights this week with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. A few showers tonight, turning to rain for a time tomorrow, possibly heavy in Northland. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, patchy rain in Hawke's Bay, spreading north tomorrow and clearing from the south. Waitomo to Kapiti and Wairarapa, including the central high country, rain, some heavy falls, clearing overnight and becoming mainly fine tomorrow. Wellington, the Marlborough Sounds, showers clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. For the remainder of Marlborough, Canterbury, Nelson, Buller and Westland, scattered showers clearing in the west this evening and elsewhere tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, remaining showers clearing this afternoon, leaving cloudy periods. Mainly fine tomorrow, but patchy drizzle along the Fiordland coast and Stewart Island. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods with rain tomorrow, easing to a few showers later. It's just gone 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora, Katrina. 2 Australian companies are now vying to run one of the biggest social housing projects in New Zealand. Tamaki Housing Association manages nearly 2,800 ex-state homes in East Auckland. Its owner, Tamaki Regeneration Company, has shortlisted 2 Australian groups to take over the tenancy management business, Compass and Horizon. I asked John Holyoake, the company's chief executive, what its process was and why no New Zealand groups had made the cut.
We went to market 2 or 3 months ago, so we invited anyone that wanted to, that were interested in coming working with us to go through a process. We had a number of criteria that we thought were important. We evaluated against that criteria, and we've shortlisted down to Horizon and Compass.
How many actually tendered for Tamaki Housing Association?
Oh, I think we ended up with about 10 or 11 organisations that registered their interest with us. That was a mixture of Australian and New Zealand organisations.
So why did no New Zealand housing group make the shortlist?
Oh, look, it's we had, as I said, we had a number of criteria. Some of that was about alignment with our values, what value we thought people could add to the business, the community. We were obviously interested in people's capability and experience. Management and governance of organisations of a similar size and complexity was very important to us. Those are things we evaluated against, and these 2 organisations came out on top.
What was it about the New Zealand groups? I mean, did they lack experience? Did they not have those values that you wanted to align with the tenants?
It's probably more around the size and capacity and capability experience. I wouldn't say it was about values at all. I know a lot of those organisations. No, it's probably about the complexity and size. I mean, you look at Compass. They currently run over 4,000 houses. Horizon run 2,500. We've got 2,800 properties. It's not a small organisation that we're asking someone to work with us on.
And was there no consideration given to this need for, say, local people to be dealing with the tenants, their knowledge of, how New Zealand works, how the tenancy system works, what kind of people that they're dealing with? Was there consideration given to that?
Oh, look, absolutely, but, absolutely. And we, Tamaki Regeneration, we exist to do that, and we work incredibly strongly with community. We understand the community, our staff understand the community. We don't see this as someone coming in and replacing all of that. We see someone as coming in and working alongside us. So, we'll be sharing all of that information. We've got an amazing group of people here that currently work with the tenants, and my vision is that it'll be the same people working with the tenants, just with a different partnership structure in place.
The argument of New Zealand housing groups is it's going to be hard for them to grow, to get to scale, and to get that experience if they're not given opportunities like this.
I think the opportunity for them is actually still to be involved. I mean, this isn't the only relationship we have with community housing providers in Tamaki. We work with a number of them on other things. And, what we are doing is, through this process, is really encouraging the 2 that are shortlisted to think about how they partner with those New Zealand organisations that can bring that New Zealand uniqueness that you spoke to, so that we can get even more value added to what we're trying to achieve.
And is there any requirement that any kind of profit that they make from this project won't go offshore, that it would be reinvested back in New Zealand?
They're all not-for-profits. The initial conversations we've had is that they would be investing back into Tamaki. We're nowhere near part of the process where we're going to start contractualising terms and conditions. We're still halfway through a process, but yeah, we've got that expectation that there's reinvestment in Tamaki.
So, John, what's the next step? When will this process all be finished and the group that wins is actually in place as the new tenancy manager?
Okay, so we're evaluating those 2 at the moment. It's a really engaging process. We're going to be having a number of meetings over the next little while with them to really understand them. We'd like to get them into our business, take them out into the community, make sure they really, really understand it, keep checking that alignment of values that I spoke about. This is incredibly important to us, and introduce them to the community. We've had community involved in parts of this process so far, and we'll continue doing that. And then to answer your question, it's probably not until the end of this calendar year that we'll be making a final decision.
I guess a lot of people, though, would say, John, what's in it for the Australians? Why would they even be interested if they're not going to make any profit from it? Why do they even want to be here when surely there must be some pretty big projects in Australia that they could be chasing?
There are big projects. Motivation for a lot of not-for-profits is about just doing what they love and what they're good at. They are already, or definitely in the case of Compass, they're already operating in New Zealand. They've got at least 2 contracts with government to do other housing in Auckland. They're not new to it. They've been trying to get into this market for a long time. They're passionate about it.
Roger Federer has swung his way into the history books, becoming the first man to win the Wimbledon 8 times. Notching up his 19th Grand Slam success, the 36-year-old Swiss defeated Croatian Marin Cilic in a one-sided victory. Cilic was sobbing courtside as he battled injuries. Federer did not drop a set during the entire Wimbledon tournament. The ABC's Steve Kinane has this report.
What a player! 3 sets to love.
What a champion here at Wimbledon.
6-1.
The first man to win 8 championships.
Roger Federer did it in style, acing his opponent Marin Cilic to win the title in less than 2 hours. It was an extraordinary achievement for a player that many had written off. After last year's tournament, Federer took 6 months off to recuperate from injuries and started the year outside the top 10 for the first time since 2001.
Got to take more time off. I don't know what's going on. I'll be gone again for the next 6 months. I'm not sure if it's going to work out this fantastic every time I come back. But no, I mean, better than holding the trophy and winning today, I guess, it's just being healthy. It's feels great and it means the world to me. We worked so hard, last year. The tournament that I played, not dropping a set, it's magical, really. I can't believe it yet. So.
After winning the title, Federer shed tears of joy. His opponent, Marin Cilic, had sobbed during the match as he battled severe blisters on his feet. At one stage, it looked like the 7th seed might have to retire. But he fought on gamely, and his opponent paid tribute to him after the match with typical sportsmanship.
It is cruel sometimes, but he fought well and he's a hero. So congratulations on a wonderful tournament, Marin. And you should be really proud. This is such a special occasion to play in the finals, and you did as good as you could. You had a wonderful tournament, and sometimes you just don't feel great in the finals. It's cruel, but be proud of yourself, and I hope we can play down the road some better ones. So.
Roger Federer's victory came just weeks before his 36th birthday. Pat Cash, who won Wimbledon 30 years ago, thinks there's no reason why the Swiss great can't win it again.
His game is efficient. It works unbelievably well on the grass. It's a bit better, easier on the body, but who's there to challenge him? It's a phenomenal performance, and he'll definitely be back here. And who's to say he won't be the favourite when we turn around in 11 and a half months' time?
The Wimbledon title is Roger Federer's 19th Grand Slam victory, the most by any men's tennis player. You wouldn't bet against him winning a 20th sometime in the next year.
Steve Kinane there from London. An emergency housing development is being built at Kokohino Marae in the Bay of Plenty to house families displaced by the Edgecumbe floods. The government is contributing $2.6 million towards the construction of 5 two-bedroom homes. Te Manu Korihi reporter Te Aniwahuri Hanganui has more.
Kokohino Marae, which is 5 kilometres south of Edgecumbe, will soon be home to some of the families who lost their own in the Edgecumbe floods. One local woman, Lolo Hale, had 22 family members staying at her place during the April floods. She says many of her whānau have had to leave the area in order to survive.
Some of them are living as far away as Opotiki and Rotorua. We had some young families that were living here down that street. And, they've had to pack their families up and go back to Auckland because they just can't survive. You're paying rent, you love the place you're in, but when you've got nowhere to live, you sort of lose that thing there. So they've been displaced.
Te Puni Kōkiri and the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment are working closely with the Pahipoto Maori Committee on the emergency housing development. The chairman of the committee, Hemana Eruera, says the idea to build the temporary homes at the marae was a response to the devastation they saw during the floods.
Our hapu
in their sadness and sympathy for all of the people, and I'm saying all of the people in Edgecumbe or around the surrounding area that were affected with the flood, we thought we'll make an offer to capitalise on the land that's on our marae to put on emergency homes, for the benefit of those that have suffered in the floods.
Hemana Eruera says they have enough land to potentially expand the development to help even more whānau.
We've got enough land here to take up, another up to 20, 30 houses. But the thing is that we'll start with the 5 and see how the ministers look at it, and then we'll move into further, additions if the need arises.
Julie Garden from the Whakatane District Council says consents for the temporary homes will be fast-tracked so families can return as soon as possible. But she says there are still a lot of families in need in Edgecumbe, and the new development will only scratch the surface of what needs to be done to help every family who needs emergency housing.
So we have a long way to go. We have around 270 homes in Edgecumbe where people are unable to return at this stage. So they're going through a process, and most of those, about 250 of those, are going through a process of drawing out their homes. So a number of people at the moment are in rental accommodation, so that's homes that they are able to rent or temporary accommodation options.
Hemana Eruera says he's not sure when the temporary housing will be ready for families to move into, but he hopes it will be soon. In the meantime, the Ministry of Social Development has temporary housing for families at the Whakatane campgrounds and in Portacombs in Edgecumbe. For Checkpoint, ko te aniwa Hurihanga Nui aho.
Whangarei parents are calling on the council to fence the city's largest playground at the town basin. On one side of the play area is a car park and road, on the other a river. Ashley Harris wrote to the council asking for it to be fenced, but was told it had no plans to do so. So the mother of 3 organised a petition, which hundreds of parents have signed. It's the second in just 2 years asking the council to fence the playground. I asked Ashley Harris exactly why she's worried.
So my concerns are that the playground itself isn't functional for families, and it's a community facility that we should feel comfortable and not stressed out and just enjoy ourselves. But in this space right now, it's there's no vision of your child. If you're on one side, you can't see the other side of where your child's going. There's no clear space around the park before it hits the river and the road. And I feel like it's the council's responsibility to fence the facility because it is a council facility.
Where do you want it fenced? Because I see right behind you where the swings are, there is actually some fencing there.
Yeah, there is. So that is literally just around I'll move to the side there, it's a disability swing. So that one swing has been fenced off. Why? I'm unsure. I have no idea. It's accessible to everybody. The gate opens and shuts, but it's literally the only part of the playground that is fenced.
So you want the entire playground fenced?
I would like the entire playground fenced to give us mums a peace of mind and just for our community to feel safe. We want somewhere where we can go for it to be safe and happy and kids can explore their boundaries without being in danger.
What has been the response from the council?
The council so far have told us that if we don't feel safe, we can go somewhere else. And as a parent, it's our responsibility to look after our children. I feel like that's a bit of a cop-out, personally, because we as parents do our best every day to be responsible for our children. And as you can see, it's massively busy here, especially in school holidays. There's so many children, and if you've got a little toddler who's, under 2, it's absolutely ridiculous. You could be running from one end to the other to try and save them from going onto the car park, relying on possibly other parents to stop them for you. And if they don't, then what,
Have there been any incidents so far? Has there any accidents that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of any accidents that have happened so far, no. But I'm aware of many mothers helping other mothers catching their children before these events do happen. So we all work together to keep our children safe. It would just be so much easier and better for our community and our children, safer for them to have a fence around the boundary of the park so that everybody can be kept safe.
You've got a petition to the
river
council, and it's actually the second petition going to the council about this.
It is, yeah, this is the second petition. So the last one was done about a year or two ago, by a lady who gave up in the end because she got lots of negative feedback about it. Personally, I feel that it's just really important. I've started the petition and we've had over 800 people sign it so far. It's been going for 2 weeks. And I just want to get it out there and get people on board and the community support, because I feel like it's just really important. So that's why I've started the petition.
Does the council have a point, though, that there are lots of other playgrounds around the city? So if you're worried about fencing, you could take your child somewhere else where it might be safer, that there might not be a busy road or a river nearby?
Oh, for sure, they've got a point there, but my point is that this park isn't safe. And there are so many people coming to this park. They've got the Hatia River loop, so they've got a loop that goes all around, so that's attracting everybody from the community. With all these rock hunting, everybody's hiding rocks around the loop and in the playgrounds. There's so many children here, it doesn't matter whether they say we can go to another one. This one is an attraction, it's in the centre of town, and people come here because it's their local park. They can walk to it, it's within walking distance for most people here. And I feel that we shouldn't have to go to another park. I feel like playgrounds are there for children and they should be made safe.
That's Ashley Harris. Now, Whangarei Mayor Cheryl Mai says she will listen to the parents' concerns, but aesthetics didn't form part of the council's decision not to fence the playground. I asked her why they won't fence it.
Very good question. Actually, this isn't the first time that council has been approached with that same request. We received a petition probably coming up a couple of years ago, and the council at the time evaluated it and said, okay, so we've created a playground. It's a destination. Parents are coming. Children are enjoying it. Whose responsibility is it to ensure that children are safe when they're going to a playground? And at the time, it was, our thinking was, okay, the parents need, or supervisors need to ensure that the children are safe. Now, I understand as a grandmother, actually, rather than a mother, taking kids to a playground, it can be difficult if you've got more than one child to monitor both. So it's still probably the position of council would be that we won't be fencing it, but if we hear a really loud voice, then I think we should be considering it.
Because being a destination playground and the situation that it's in, it's got a very busy road on one side, the river on the other side. Don't you think these parents have got a point, the fact that it is so busy and it's so popular?
It's not actually a busy road. It is a road that provides access to the car parking area for the town basin and for the playground. So it's not as if it's a state highway or anything like that. So vehicles are moving slowly, but yes, there is still a risk there that parents need to have their eye open for. And of course, there is a boardwalk right beside the beautiful Hatia River, and water is an attraction to children as well. So there definitely is a concern from parents, and we're hearing that. And if it's loud enough, then I think we need to work with the community. We've had a situation out at a fabulous playground out at Nongaru, where the community got together and raised the funds and actually fenced off the playground themselves.
So you're saying this is what the parents here should do, that they should raise the money themselves and get the fence built?
What I'm saying is that could be an option that could be considered. That I'm not saying for 1 minute that that's the path that they should take, but if it was something that perhaps there was a groundswell of support from the community.
Well, how much support do you need? Because this is the second petition, and in 2 weeks, Ashley Harris has gathered 800 signatures.
And it would be really interesting if it were put to the people who'd signed the petition, would you be prepared to pitch in with a little bit of extra money? Because it's one of those situations where we've got the rates have been raised for this year, set with the work program program that we've got, and the work program for this year doesn't include a fence.
So the council couldn't afford. The council couldn't afford to put a fence around this one?
It's an additional cost. So if we were to do that fence, then something else would have to not be done to enable us, because we want to balance the budget.
How much would a fence around that playground cost?
I have absolutely no idea. I don't have that information at the moment, Sharon. It'd be interesting to find out what it was for the Nungaru playground, but I don't have that information at my fingertips.
So what you're saying is the message to the parents is, if your voice is loud enough, we'll look at it, but right now it's not a consideration.
I think that my message is we really enjoy hearing from the community for issues that are important to them. 800 signatures is clearly, that's a good indication that this is an issue that we need to readdress. I'd really love to talk with the petition organisers and just get them to add another little question around, would you be prepared to pay? And, I would imagine that many would say, actually, that's the responsibility of the council. But remember, the council is the ratepayers. Ratepayers contribute to the funds for the projects that are done in the district.
And that's the Whangarei Mayor Cheryl Mai, and that is Checkpoint for this evening. Have a very good evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Changes are being made to child support to help avoid a payments backlog worth billions of dollars. A fire has forced the Lakes District Health Board to cancel elective surgery at Rotorua and Taupo hospitals. Australians are about to take over one of the country's largest social housing projects. A Labour MP says she'll camp in the centre of Dunedin until 2 women get state houses. Ruapehu's mayor and his chief executive are once again at odds, this time over intercepted emails. A Paeroa man is recovering in hospital after getting stuck in a camper van for 3 days. An investigation is underway into the shooting of a 40-year-old Australian woman by a police officer at her home in the American city of Minneapolis. South Korea has proposed military talks with